Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and what an honor it is to welcome back a friend of the program and somebody who's got a lot vested in the future. And I think anybody that actually has an understanding or things that matter to them in the future are very much concerned about what we would consider man-made climate change in the world today. It's coming at us fast and furious, and I just think it's really a vexing issue to try to once people, at least in our democratic process, the idea is that legislation is supposed to serve the people and also help protect our country, and yet we can't seem to pass any bill on anything related to the future. And time is running out, and I don't know what anything's going to look like, but I do know that if we had taken these things, I wouldn't say more seriously, but if we had actually not denied the reality of climate change, in fact, we might be in a better place today. Code Red Congress is really a law that if enacted, would provide a lot of resources to help save our planet and our climate, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. Jacqueline Sabec, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. Glad to be here.
I don't know. Have you ever dealt with anyone in your family that had mental illness?
No, not directly in my family, but I've read a lot about mental illness, and I'm very interested in mental health.
I guess what I'm trying to say is we're not really. You said you send me a lot of information about Code Red Congress, and I just feel like I'm curious about what you think or how things should be handled with people that are mentally ill. I don't say that jokingly. I'm saying that they are completely in an alternative universe. They deny reality, and is democracy really going to? Is it an effective tool for people that are denying truth and facts? And I say that only because it's not a fair playing field. It's like, if you keep moving the goalposts back or just keep coming up with some other rationale that's bizarre to deny the reality of the situation. I wonder what you really think is the most effective strategy in dealing with some of these issues legislatively.
Yeah, well, one thing that I've learned in my work on this Code Red Congress action is that there is just so much misinformation out there. And one of the statistics that stuck with me that's shocking is that apparently only 21% of Americans understand that 99% of the climate scientists agree that human industrial activity is actually warming the planet. So I don't know if people are in denial or if they have a mental illness or if they just don't know because there's so much misinformation out there. So I'm hoping with the Code Red Congress action plan that we're launching today, that one thing I'm hoping it will do is help educate people and also give them a sense of hope instead of despair, that there actually is something on the table right now that we can do that might move the needle forward in a positive way.
For those that are listening and that will hear this later, it's one thing to pass a bill, but what is in the law that is going to give people hope or make things better? I think, first of all, the misinformation thing is that's just an excuse. You have the reason we're in the situation we're in now is because when you lie every day for 4 years, people begin to believe that as truth, and then they're insulted when somebody's saying, no, you're wrong. But that's the problem with lying, is that now we have a bunch of people who have no idea. So the misinformation that's not a legitimate excuse. The legitimate excuse is, how do you get people who are definitely believing that, that they're more interested in just sort of burying their heads in the sand, or they've been shrouded in so much dogma that they believe that this is what is supposed to be happening based on the Bible, or there's just a lot of groupthink. I mean, have you worked in situations where, not at the legislative level, but how have you worked with people who are not dealing with the same set of facts that you have in a court of law?
Well, not only in the court of law, it's really more the court of social opinion.
Sure.
And internet AI bandwidth that's far more capable than you or I in sharing information. I don't know if you've seen the documentary about how social media works and how the AI basically gives you the information that you want to see, and they know what you would look for, and they target that information specifically to you. So it kind of brings up this issue of what is the truth, because if I'm being shown what I want to see, and you're being shown what you want to see, and those two things are completely different, where has the truth actually gone? So that's a big problem. And I don't know exactly how to tackle that piece of this, but I know right now we have this bill that's up for a vote in both houses of Congress, and that there are senators from West Virginia, Manchin, and the senator from Arizona, Sinema, and that they are standing in the way of this bill passing, and that even people who maybe believe that things are happening because of the Bible, I mean, they can still see that these things are happening. And so one of the problems I have with all of this is, like, it's just, to me, it's common sense. I mean, just look around at your own environment.
Right.
What's happening?
Right.
And do you think you should try to do something about it?
I think that, so the question, if you have the answer, is what would be done about it if Manchin and Sinema got out of their own way and voted for this thing? What would be the ideal? Not that it would necessarily come to fruition, but I think it's the whole point. It's like, a lot of people would say, like, well, they just want to pass it because they want a political victory. But what is in the bills, or what is in this bill that they are holding up?
Well, if the plan passes as it was intended with a strong climate legislation, then it's expected to get the United States to 80% pollution-free electricity by 2030, and provide major tax incentives for solar, wind, energy efficiency, a smart grid, electric cars, charging stations, geothermal, and batteries, and then cutting subsidies for fossil fuels. And it also drives major investment into communities that are the hardest hit by environmental injustice, which are poor communities and communities of color. But the piece about cutting subsidies for fossil fuels is where Senator Manchin seems to have a conflict of interest. And the sad thing about this legislation, is my understanding right now, is that no Republican senators are going to vote in favor of it, even though some of their states are being hit the hardest by climate change and their people. But the two Democratic senators that also stand in the way are Manchin and Sinema. And Manchin, because he has so many investments in fossil fuel, would rather protect his investments than protect the people of his state.
Right. I have to believe. I mean, I was just doing some reading on it last night. I mean, it's pretty common. It's pretty evident. Sinema, Kristen Sinema, in my state of Arizona, she, I think this just speaks to how calamitous our situation is. Is this? She was a member of the Green Party, and
right.
now she's. I mean, clearly, it's just her reelection, her coffers. The way she gets reelected is through fossil fuels. I mean, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, you don't know where that money's coming from, but you just don't go from a Green Party progressive to somebody who's holding up legislation that would essentially back up most of what I'm sure the Green Party is in a pretty strong alignment with what's in the bill. So
Right.
it's like I don't. Yeah, that was really, Jacqueline, the question I have. Like, in the midst of all the greed and the self interest, why? What keeps you going on this? I mean, why do you? Why? I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm just to me, it's like it's deflating to like look at these people, and like Cinema, who was supposedly a Green Party member, and then somehow she just shifts and is like, oh no, and really, doesn't it just come down to the idea that the dirty little secret is that Manchin State is all white, and this state, Arizona, is becoming much larger Hispanic population, and they can't justify to the big coffers and the fossil fuel people that giving these communities a better shot at dealing with climate change is something worth supporting. I mean, there is a racial component to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a racial component to it, and there's a self-interest component to it. And the sad thing is that these people really aren't very expensive to buy off. I don't know how much Cinema received from the fossil fuel industry for lobbying, but I think Manchin received only $179,000, and I think his total investment in fossil fuels is like $5 million. That's not that much money in the grand scheme of things, given how much harm he's going to cause with his interference with this bill. Because it doesn't just even affect the United States. What's going to happen is that the bill, if it doesn't pass or if it gets substantially watered down, the next thing that's going to happen is that President Biden goes to Glasgow in November for the international climate meetings, and he's not going to have the United States present there as a leader in this space. And if the United States can't show up as a leader, we can't pressure other countries to do the right thing either. So I mean, to me, that's really so shocking that a single human or two, because they're so interested in money or even their own reelection, would stand in the way of something so important for the entire planet. And why do I do it? I mean, Bill Graham once said, if you can do something, do it. If you can't, shut the F up.
I love that. And I mean, that's, and that's the, I think that's the, and I understand putting the focus on Cinema and Manchin because they're Democrats, but, in a different time, not that long ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago, probably, you wouldn't have to rely on the entire party line vote. You'd have Republicans who were critical thinkers, who believed in science, who you'd have them coming and supporting bills just based on the common good. I just wonder where do you see? I tend to try to just dwell in my world. Try to avoid the artificial intelligence and just create my own, narratives and content. But I did watch a little bit of the news last night, and there were like some pretty hyperbolic people basically screaming at the mountaintop that we are at the precipice of something awful that's about to occur. I don't know what it is, but it's really bad. And I'm talking about like some sort of domestic attack, very catastrophic kind of thing. These people are not like, reactionary people. They literally look at democracy being on the brink. And I'm not trying to say stuff that you don't, or that the people don't already know, but I don't know, what would Bill Graham say to the fact that we have people that are supposedly very bright, articulate, successful Americans that basically are just involved in groupthink, that are involved in a cult, involved in a situation where it's not that, and I'm talking about the Republican Party, the idea that there is, you know, not, they're all just in lockstep following a leader or a cult. Have you ever worked with trying to break a cult before? I mean, this doesn't never end. It never ends with peace. And I just, to me, it's like, this is the troublesome part, is that we're talking about like something for our kids and their futures. I know my girls are they're very conscious about the environment, and they want to be involved so desperately, and they are trying to do it the best thing they can. But what's going to be left for them, and why these people? I guess maybe my question for you is, in your life, what was the best persuading job you've ever done with somebody that you felt was completely shrouded in dogma and groupthink? Were you ever able to get them to actually just acknowledge that what we're dealing with is so much larger than one person, that we're dealing with something that's affecting humanity?
Yeah, well, before I answer that, I want to go back to the Bill Graham question.
Yeah.
I obviously, I don't know what Bill would do, but I know that he was a survivor of the Holocaust, and that his family died in the Holocaust because of the dogma of what was happening at that time. And I can only imagine that he specifically and personally understood the importance of standing up for what you believe in and not letting groupthink start to really dictate how culture and societies are run and how dangerous it really can become. But that did change, and we did fight that battle, and I don't know that it necessarily ended in peace forever and ever, but I mean, that war was won. And I think that we have to keep making progress and go forward. I still believe in humanity. I still believe that. I even believe in the Republicans. I mean, I think that there's a chance the Republicans could do the right thing. Maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. And I don't even mind people wanting to make money. I think you can make money on green energy and green jobs. I don't have a problem with that. But I do think that there's a basic right and wrong, that's out there. And when you see people that are hurting and dying, and not just humans, but the plant life, the animal life, these things are being severely impacted by human industrial activity, and it's wrong. So have I ever personally been part of an effort against a group that has been very stubborn? I don't think so, not on this level. And luckily for me, I went to school. It was in Tennessee, which I know people consider conservative, and it's a red state, but I'm really thankful for the high school that I went to, because it was based on the Socratic method of teaching, and it taught me to think critically.
Well, it certainly paid off, because you are a brilliant cat. I mean, no, I'm with you. I mean, and also the whole idea, like, there's comes a point when, I don't know. I mean, Jacqueline, just stepping back for a minute, we just passed the 20-year anniversary of 9/11, and you talk about this basic right and wrong, but I don't see. I mean, I'm glad that I'm not sure why you have faith in the Republican Party. Maybe not tomorrow, but because the reason that's so harrowing is that Bin Laden, I just wonder if you think where we are right now on this unknown precipice, really, if you think Bin Laden accomplished his mission as dastardly as it was, because what he did, even though he may not have necessarily intended it this way, but he pulled it off. We no longer, I I have no problem talking to people of all different persuasions. I'm not offended if people have different views. I recognize there's a lot of polarization. I'm not part of that. I try to bring people together, obviously, through music and love. But we look at people now, well, especially the Republican Party. They don't look at the opposition as a disagreeing opposition. They look at them as the enemy. We see each other as the enemy now. I mean, this idea that there is any kind of camaraderie, outside of Liz Cheney and Adam Kissinger on the committee. I mean, they won't even investigate the insurrection. So to me, it's like, do you believe that? Because I just don't see it being like, oh yeah, it's a bunch of fiscal conservative people, or socially conservative people that are just sort of lost in the woods. No, the party's been taken over by. I mean, it's just it to me. We are really close to the edge, and I wonder what gives you hope that in Republicans at this point. I mean, based on the news I watched last night, the feeling that I have, and I hope I'm wrong, but it just things have metastasized in the wrong direction since January 6th.
Yeah. Well, I think we are close to the edge, and I think we have to be really careful and thoughtful, and I think we have to focus on the next election cycle very carefully, and we have to get to the polls. And when I say I believe in the Republican Party, I guess what I really mean is that I believe in people, and I believe that, the politicians seem to be pretty easily bought and sold and influenced by others. So I believe in people still having the capacity to do the right thing and to force, to push their own representatives to also do the right thing. Now, that is up against a lot of misinformation, and as you say, heads buried in the sand, and it's not going to be an easy task. But I guess two things. One, I'm a mom, so that's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got 2 teenagers, and I don't know if you saw this report that just came out, but the mental health of teenagers and kids is really being negatively impacted.
Horrible. Yeah, no, well, this absolutely.
So we have to do this for them. And then two,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just so pleased with this Code Red Congress action that we're doing today, and everybody should go to coderedcongress.com and write to your representatives. But I've been so inspired by all of the artists and influencers and actors that have come on board to help us with this. Now, right now it feels like I'm about to have a party and like you don't know if anybody's really going to show up. But I have to say I've been inspired by how many celebrities have jumped on board to help with this push.
Let me ask, do you think that is, I think it's awesome, first of all. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I just try to do, I try to pick up, if I drop a wrapper out of my pocket, I try to pick it up. We try to do some composting at the house. We do what we can in our little world to do our part. And it's only now just beginning to cool down in Arizona, which is, it's been about 100 degrees every day. The climate is definitely funky, and you can just feel it's getting hotter. But do you think that celebrities are the best people to carry this? Is it to motivate younger cats to get out? I just feel like, again, in the time that we're living in, it just seems to me like I don't necessarily know who would go in their place because of their name recognition and ID popularity. But do you really think that they're going to push the needle on I don't know, centrist people that otherwise are, voting just to make sure that they're doing a certain thing to make sure they get reelected in the next election, or like you said, protect their investments? What is the rationale behind bringing in all this celebrity sort of status. To me, it would just be another talking point to say it's just another liberal Hollywood elite move.
Well, I think one thing that the artists have that they didn't even have 10 years ago, not the way they do today, is the ability to directly connect with people.
Right.
And so what they can bring is a direct connection to their audience to help inform them, let them know that this is something that they believe is important, and give them the resources to actually have their voices heard in a really direct way. And that didn't exist a while ago. And, you know, to put this in perspective, if everyone who volunteered to participate in this action today, you know, does what they said they were going to do, we'll probably reach, just with the immediate posts, about 150 million people. To put that in perspective, you know, Nancy Pelosi, I think she has like 1 million followers, and most of the senators have maybe like 20,000 followers. So the artists and celebrities, with the use of technology, really do and can reach the masses with this message. And that's what we're hoping that they can help us with. And, you know, there's also a long tradition of artists helping make a difference in social movements, you know, like Harry Belafonte and Bob Dylan for civil rights, Marvel Gaye on the environment, John and Yoko on Vietnam War, Lady Gaga on LGBT rights, Beyonce on social and racial and criminal justice reform. So, you know, and then these artists are also being advised by climate scientists, so they're informed, and it's important to them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that's the biggest crux, though, is that not only. Anyway, I'm just stating the obvious, but that's the problem. Is that I'm not even sure how many people really, based on what's happened with the pandemic and they don't believe in science, so they don't care. They it's too complicated for them. They're threatened by doctors. They're threatened by people that have credentials academically that understand this stuff to a T. And yet people don't want to hear about it because it's too complicated. They feel frustrated. They feel inadequate. And so they put their head in the sand. Or in the case of cinema, what, I mean, I don't think she has kids. She's like a really, I have no affinity one way or the other for her. Manchin, I don't I mean, to me, it's just, he's just trying to, curry favor and maybe try to get something out of Biden. It's not like he's worried about re-election. I mean, he's been there forever. I just want you to talk to Kristen Sinema about why kids are under so much duress today, specifically teenagers.
They're under so much duress because people like Sinema aren't speaking up for them and their future.
And then like for some, she doesn't have children, and I don't really know what her whole background is, but like why, like for parents, why is it? Would you explain to her why they are, what they are sensing that and she's bought off. I mean, that's the problem. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know she was a Green Party member. I mean, how could you even live? How could you possibly want to? I don't know. It's really weird. I mean, I wouldn't want to continue in any position where I felt like such a fraud. But I guess you get to a point when you're just blinded by, I don't know, just, comfortability, status, power, and all of a sudden you're acting against everything that you actually really believe in. I mean, that's a pretty, and I just know from my older daughter, I mean, do your kids worry that they're what will be left of the world when they're adults? What is their biggest, I mean, I know my older daughter she recognizes that there's a real craven side of this country that has been allowed to come out of the bottle. It's always been there. It's just now the scab's been ripped off and they're fully ensconced. And in fact, they're voicing their opinion, and it's pretty bad. And I just know that it's very disheartening for someone like my older daughter who's, very invested in the future and wanting to see a brighter future. So what do you think if cinema cares about the children of the country, what would you like her to understand about what kids are feeling, why they're under so much duress? Like, what are the major things that are vexing them? Because oftentimes they are our best teachers.
Yeah, well, even if Cinema doesn't have children, her constituents have children, and the people in her state have children, and those are the people that she's supposed to be representing. And what my understanding, even just talking to my own children, is that right now they feel like they're just inheriting this mess. And it's a pretty big mess.
It is. That's the, like, that's the thing, is that, not that you can really see how it's all going to unfold, but the people, there are people that are invested, their livelihoods, they make their livings as engineers and data collectors, and they have jobs in the fields with all these fossil fuel companies. And so people are going to say, oh, there's all these jobs that are going to be lost, and, we're going to lose all our sovereignty and our ability to generate easy resources. And so it's collectively, like, it's more of a consciousness shift. It's the idea of electric cars and less gas stations and more, electric fuel stations. And, it's more progressive. It's more communal. And there's a part of America that just says, F that. I want to drive my SUV and I want to fill up my gas tank every 20 miles, and I don't give an F that you want electronic fueling stations on every corner. And so there's this, like, it's like, what would you say to people that say this is just the softening of America, the weakening of America? We're going to have our powers, as far as resources and things like that, because we're not going to rely on them as much. We're just not going to be one of the superpowers anymore. We've become such a soft, because to me, like, some of the when you say green jobs and green infrastructure, like, I don't think people can really get their head around what that actually looks like, and how, if they had to make a career change, what that would look like.
Well, I can tell you that it's an important issue, because the opposite is actually true. So if there's no action on climate change, it's guaranteed to hurt the economy in a significant way.
Right.
Not only with extreme weather and fires and droughts and flooding and the massive insurance losses and all the other costs, but clean energy is also cheaper than dirty energy now, and it's getting rapidly cheaper. And that transition, if it were properly financed from the top down, will save money for Americans and the people that want to drive their SUVs, which, I don't have a problem with people wanting to drive SUVs or even making money. That's not my issue. My issue is that we have to have policy change at the top, because it's even like what you said, like, you're doing what you can in your family, I'm doing what I can in my family. That isn't going to change. It's not going to push the needle to where we need it to be. We have to have massive change at the top down. And there's no reason we shouldn't have it and can't have it. And with kids, I mean, I guess the good news there is that I know there's research out there that's showing that children are actually, even though they're traumatized by all this, they're increasingly engaged, especially young female, like teenagers, and they're advocating pretty, vigorously for their future, and they're effective advocates for their parents as well. So I love that it's daughters who are found to be the most effective at changing their dads' minds about these issues.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, it's what is your law firm doing specifically? I always am curious about like what your role is in these. I mean, in this whole process. How can you take the momentum from uh, this initiative, and what do you do with it in order to try to, if get the legislation over the top, if that is in fact a role of yours?
Yeah, well, that would be the best thing because, my law firm, my main office is in Los Angeles. It's in a building in Century City. We don't control the building. We just rent a floor
Sure.
in that building. But if we had these policy changes at the top down where we, have requirements for solar or for energy efficient lights being used in buildings, that's the kind of change we need. And it's not the kind of change that even the people inside the building, I'm sure they could and should push for it. But ultimately, it's going to be policy driven, on a local, state, and federal level. So I feel like this action that we're doing today, the Code Red Congress, trying to push the climate provisions of the Build Back Better bill, that is the most significant thing any of us could do right now to make real change happen. And that those real changes are going to be what trickles down to, my law firm, your radio station, all of the other organizations that fall under the umbrella of the local, state, and federal government.
What would you say to people that would say like, this is, well, I guess also like, do we know do we know when the vote is going to take place? Are they waiting for? There just seems like there's so much right now. It's just I was looking at just focusing on all these other things that are sort of these crises because there's no real deliberative checks and balances going on, that we're just sort of held hostage to a couple of centrist senators because we don't really have a working democracy. What's the best way for people to keep this on the front burner? Is it going after the polluters? That seems like they have more money than they can spread as much disinformation and as possible. I guess also the idea is like you say, like, I don't have a problem with people making money. Of course, that's okay. But what all of a sudden happens when you're talking about a job that you're extracting oil, making 85, 90 grand a year, and now all of a sudden you're retrofitting those things for green energy and your salary's been cut in half? How do you justify that? If in fact that's, what if you make less money? People are trying to support their families doing, I don't know, it's hard for me to fault people that are doing work in hardcore blue collar work, even though it might be polluting the environment, but yet they're making enough money to support their family. And then based on we don't really have any we don't have any data to back up that these green jobs would pay as well as the other jobs that are currently there.
Yeah. Well, you probably love Loretta Lynn as much as I do. And she was, coal miner's daughter. And so I hear what you're saying. I definitely don't want any of those families to be hurt either. And that's, again, why the policy changes are so important, because there has to be a just transition to support the energy workers. Those guys have worked so hard to create this prosperity that we've all enjoyed in this country. But we also have to move quickly to change our energy transportation and our infrastructure to stop polluting and heating the earth. And in doing that, it will actually create enormous numbers of new jobs and safer jobs. And so it is a transition, and I definitely don't have all the answers there. But I know that if we have the policy changes coming from the top, we can have that kind of just transition where those families are not as impacted, and we can create new and safer jobs that are helpful to the planet and those people's children than we have now.
You know, one final question is just the idea that, in the 1970s, we were talking about, green living, greenhouses. We were talking about a lot of the stuff that people are talking about today. The difference was that a lot of the world was in the dark, and now we are just one of the players on a stage. I would argue that the only reason we're still there actually is because of our military. But why, even if we did, Jacqueline, even if we did the right thing on this issue, why would countries, much less quote unquote democratic countries like Russia, Iran's not part of the UN, but China, India, why would they even care? I mean, people are like, well, we have to lead by example, and then we're going to make all these wholesale changes that are going to positively impact our future, and yet people are going to say, yeah, but none of these other people who are now power players that were not 40 years ago, they don't care, and they're not going to change. So why should we? And what would you say to them?
Well, it's possible that they're right, that they won't change, but we have to try. We have to try, and we have to show up having done our own, change at home and created a policy that we can be proud of and that we can take to those other countries and those global meetings and say, hey, we're showing up having done our part.
Right. But the major polluters, I don't think France, England, Germany, I don't think they're the ones that we have to convince. It's the other people that are polluting the world. I think that's the paralysis of, and it's something that we've lost that I think this is about fairness. This is about justice. This is about right and wrong. And I think so many people are just like, well, if we go so far in this direction of justice or what's right, that we're going to be left looking like fools because the greed factor in today's world and the just sort of the general zeitgeist of the world power is such that it's like every man for himself and greed is good. I think people are paralyzed by trying to what would you say to people that are just, they know they want to do the right thing and they're just so hung up on all the fact that they're just going to, their ego's so involved that they're going to lose a lot of financial power, or they just feel like they're going to be taken advantage of in the world, but they really do want to do the right thing. So I think a lot of people are in that boat. They're very torn, which is why you see a lot of dysfunction at the legislative level. People are really fighting against what their instinct and intuition are telling them. What would you tell them about worst case scenario? We go, this bill passes, we go full into a Green New Deal, and yet the world doesn't follow. The major powers don't follow. Are we going to? Can you talk to those people about why it's okay to do the right thing?
Well, I don't think the zeitgeist, again, of young people is greed. And so the young people are the ones that are going to be voting. And so if those people even are solely self-interested, they need to listen to the young people and what they want. And the overwhelming evidence is that they understand the problem with climate change, and they're going to demand that something be done about it. So even if you're only self-interested, you need to pay attention to that. And I don't know what's going to happen with the other world powers, but if we don't want our country to be leaders, then I'm not sure I can respect that opinion.
Totally. That's the Also, do you think that an initiative to, I don't know, the greatest generation is called that because they sacrificed everything for the world and conquered Hitler and the Axis powers, and then natural cause of life. The average um, lifespan was much shorter, so they were able to pass the baton in a very selfless way into the boomer generation. And what's your message to the boomers, especially? I mean, I think the biggest issue is that all the power is wrapped up in an old, rickety generation. Not that they're not good people. Some of them are. Some of them had great service. But I look at the people that are in leadership, and they should have been out the door 10 years ago. And that's the problem, is that you can talk about how young people are asserting themselves and you have to listen to them. I don't know if they have to right now, because there's nobody in Congress, really, outside of a handful of people, that reflect what the new America looks like. And that's the biggest problem, is you have people in their 80s who are so far out of touch that I just wonder what you would say to them about exiting stage right. I know Bill Graham would yank them by the umbrella and pull them off the stage, but they're really making, that their whole philosophy is, well, we can fix it. We know how to fix it. And they're paralyzed about passing the torch to a younger generation of people who are more willing to solve problems than get reelected. What would be your message to them about maybe saying it's, the time has come for you to leave?
Well, if they knew how to fix it, they've had plenty of time to fix it. They haven't done that. So they're wrong. They don't know how to fix it. Or if they know how to fix it, they failed because they haven't fixed anything. And so if their job is to fix these things and their claim is that they know how to do that, then it probably is time for them to leave.
You're not a boomer, are you?
What year do you have to be born to be a
I
boomer?
don't know. I think I don't even know. I just didn't want to, it's you realize what I'm saying. I mean, you look at the leaders of our country, and we are on the precipice, and yet I wonder if they actually, it's just, you don't see that transition of power to a younger generation that's more in touch with what's right and wrong. And I just wonder about, just from putting on your legal hat, even if the legislation passes based on the Supreme Court ruling that, companies are people, that these old companies that, with that, oil, gas, and drilling and copper and mining and things like that, like, why won't they just hold this stuff up in court with lawsuits? I mean, what gives you hope that they're going to acquiesce and allow this, or this thing's just going to be tied? I mean, we just saw the other day. I mean, I love to see the wheels of justice moving, but it's pretty deflating to have, Alan Weisselberg, he's not going to be on, the trial's not going to start for at least a year. So, like, this stuff takes years, especially when you're not doing the right thing. And so don't you think that, or am I naive, or legalistically, can the polluters just tie this up in court inevitably based on our legal system, or am I wrong?
Yeah. Well, they're certainly spending millions of dollars to try to get this legislation to not pass, and they can certainly file lawsuits and they can try to hold it up. But this is where I think the celebrity power really is helpful, again, because their reach isn't even just domestic. Their reach is global. And if we can reach enough people and get this message really out and get enough voices heard on the issue, I think at some point that we're going to reach a tipping point And these people are going to know that the world is watching and that the world is demanding change, and it's bigger than them.
I hope so.
That's the hope.
Yeah, no,
That's
and you know, that's the overarching thing. Jacqueline Sabec, I will get this interview up. So just to tell people, cats that'll listen to this when we put it up on new media. It's not social media. People have to stop calling it social media. It's the whole thing is just, it can be used as an incredible resource if you're actually thinking and using your own content to drive consciousness and not falling into this groupthink stuff, which is, I just don't understand it. It drives me a little bit crazy that I just don't. The people have to wake up. You know, I think at the end of the day, the people there has to be an awakening. And the amount of rot and groupthink and dogma is just at an all-time high, and that'll be the vexing thing. But for people that are listening to this that feel the same way we do, or are somewhere in the middle of the road, or just want to do something, what are the best ways for them to channel that energy?
Yeah, we've got to wake up and we have to take action. And so one very simple thing that you can do today is go to coderedcongress.com and write your representative and tell them that this is an issue that's important to you and that you urge them to pass the strongest climate legislation in American history.
And when will how long will this sort of thing be going on?
Well, yeah, the vote was supposed to take place the week of September 27th. It may still take place in both houses of Congress that week. But we also know that there are people trying to stop it and water it down, and things could get complicated. But right now, the best thing we can do is raise our voices collectively and by the millions and tell them that we are paying attention, that we do understand the issues, and that we're watching them, and that we expect them to act on our behalf.
Jacqueline Sabec, I really look forward to meeting you in person one day. It is always an honor to talk to you. I really wish, people in your position, if there were 9 out of 10 people like you, we probably wouldn't be needing to talk about this right now. But I pray that I'm wrong. I pray that I am naive and don't know what I'm talking about. But
well, you're being realistic. And my counter is we have to do what we can, or we have to, shut up. And I'm just going to try to do what I can and hope everybody else does the same.
Bill Graham is smiling down. Thank you, my friend. It was so good to hear you.
Great to talk to you, Jake. Take care.
Later. Bye.
Bye.
Code Red Congress. Go there, inform your representative about the need for action against man-made climate change. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. We will see you later.